Hey, what's up guys? Joker here. Today we are going to be taking a look at a Clevo laptop from AVA Direct, who sent over this custom laptop for me to test out in this video. We've taken a look at one of their custom desktops in the past, and now we've got one of the laptops which you can actually configure over on their website to have any of the parts that you want. The configuration I'm taking a look at costs just a little bit over $2,000, and it's got a GTX 1070 in there, along with an i7 7700HQ and 16 gigabytes of DDR4 memory. And we'll go over all of that with the custom configurator soon, because you don't have to get just this option that I'm looking at here today. You can configure all the different parts in it, choose what type of panel you want and all of that. This one's actually a 4K with IPS and G-Sync, and the display on it looks absolutely freaking gorgeous. Before we get into game performance and testing, let's take a quick overview of the outside of the laptop, see what it looks like and all of the different ports that you have on it for connectivity. Now, the first thing I noticed as soon as I took it out of the box was just the clean matte black exterior, which I think is gorgeous. It's very nice looking laptop, not gaudy in any way with like black and red gamer colors. The only color-ish thing on it is the silver AVA logo on the backside of the monitor. And even though this is a Clevo logo, it's basically endorsed by AVA. You do the configuration through their website, but Clevo in general is just an OEM manufacturer, and a lot of the big companies usually source their laptops from Clevo, which then they can kind of customize a little bit, put their own spin on it, their logo and things like that. But a lot of the big laptop manufacturers that you might know out there are probably using Clevo, so it might be the laptop brand you never heard of, but you may have likely used at some point in the past. Taking a look at the left side of the laptop, you can see over here we've got our power plug. There's a power brick included in it, although on their configurator, if you want to get an extra power brick, then you definitely do have the option to do that. And we've also got an HDMI as well as 2 DisplayPort outs on here, because you can actually hook up 3 external monitors into this laptop at one time if you choose to do so. We've also got a USB Type-C, and then we've got 2 USB 3 ports. There are no USB 2 ports on this thing, so thankfully just all USB 3 and also the Type-C. Coming over to the right side here, we'll go left to right here. We've got a headphone jack as well as microphone, and a multi-port which can handle cables that do microphone as well as headphones if you happen to be using that. We've also got an SD card reader, which has a little protector in there that you can pop out and put in an SD card if you want to do that, which is perfect for me as a video editor. It's something I definitely plan to take advantage of when I head to PAX East at the beginning of April. I'm going to be bringing this one along with me so that I can edit all of my videos from the event. We've also got 2 more USB 3 ports, so since this is all USB 3, the SD card reader is running over a USB 3 controller, which means you should be able to get the full speed of your SD cards and not be limited to a USB 2 controller like I've seen on some other laptops in the past. Next to that, we've also got an Ethernet jack, which has a little kind of protector over that as well. You have to just toggle open, then you can pop in full RJ45 connector if you want to do that. And then lastly, we've got a Kensington lock jack on here. Opening up the laptop here, we have a full 17-inch screen. This one is 4K IPS, and it has G-Sync, and there is a webcam above that, although I'm not planning to utilize it, as laptop webcams tend to not be that great. If I need to use a webcam, I'll probably use my Logitech C922. For the keyboard, we've got full RGB on here with a power button up above that. Not really any complaints about the keyboard. It's not mechanical or anything like that. It's just your traditional sort of laptop chiclet keys. It's not really, I wouldn't really call them mushy, but it's definitely not a mechanical keyboard like the Triton 700 that I took a look at a couple months ago. And then down below that, we've got a touchpad here, left and right clicks, which are pronounced with physical buttons rather than being built into the touchpad, which I personally prefer. And then also a fingerprint reader if you want to use that to sign into Windows or any other applications that happen to support it. Now, as I said, the sample I'm rocking is a 4K G-Sync monitor, so it is 60 Hz, and the G-Sync is absolutely fantastic for games. And even though it's only running a GTX 1070, you could play something like Overwatch in full 4K with no issues whatsoever. But for some other games, you're probably going to want to lower the resolution there, so 4K is not going to be entirely necessary for your gaming experience, at least on a 17-inch screen, because it's so small. The pixel density at 4K and even 1440p is going to be so high that the difference between the two in gaming is going to be very, very tiny. However, at the desktop, I definitely saw an advantage to having the 4K display. It's something that I really liked, and it made text, images, and everything just super duper crisp. And the IPS panel on here is actually excellent. Very vibrant in colors at the desktop as well as in games. So I just really love the display on this. This was probably one of my favorite features on this laptop was the 4K IPS display. And as I said a couple times now, it's got G-Sync, so that's going to help keep your games nice and smooth. I ended up using 150% scaling at the desktop, which was actually quite nice to use. There was only a couple of applications that didn't fully support it. One that comes to mind was Origin, where the title bar across the top still had very, very small text. So your mileage may vary depending on the applications you're looking to run. So if there's a certain application you need to use all of the time, you should go ahead and Google around and see how it, scales with Windows 10 scaling, which has definitely come a long way from previous versions of Windows, but it's still not perfect as it does require some of the third-party applications to add in their own support for that along with it. Steam worked absolutely perfectly though. Uplay was another one that scaled very well at the 150% scaling, and all the images and the text were all still super crisp, so that's really kind of why I like the 4K display on this one, although I didn't find it entirely necessary for gaming as I had previously mentioned. When it came to game performance, it was excellent with the GTX 1070 in here rocking 8GB of video memory. And as I had said, I don't really see the need to be gaming at 4K all the time. Unless you do come across a title that's not as demanding and you have the option to take advantage of the 4K, then by all means, go ahead and do so. But I would say 1440p gaming was the real sweet spot here. The only game that I could find, that I tested at least, that had buttery smooth 60 frames per second performance was Overwatch at 4K, and that just ran fantastic. I did not see any dips below that in 60. The game looked crisp, it was gorgeous, and I was definitely able to take advantage of the full 4K display here. So yeah, that's one of those games where you can certainly look to play at Ultra HD. But in other games, you're probably going to want to focus on 1440p or even 1080p if you run into something that demanding that you can't run at 1440p in high settings, which is how I did all of my personal testing. If you look at Rainbow Six Siege here, that ends up getting an average of 45 FPS in 4K. But when I tested it at 1440p, I got an average of 96 FPS, and that was using FXAA. So no resolution scaling there whatsoever with the temporal anti-aliasing, which is an option you can use in that game, which pretty much cuts the resolution in half or whatever parameter you set it to. But I did not use that, so I was playing at full resolution in all of my testing on Rainbow Six Siege, and that was perfect at 1440p. On high settings. You could probably even look to raise up a couple of other options like textures if that's important to you to have higher settings on stuff like that, but perfectly fine here at 1440p in high settings on Rainbow Six and every other title that I tested here, honestly. So let's go ahead and take a look at the game performance numbers now. We'll go over the average FPS and then the 1% low. I did test in 1080, 1440, as well as 4K. All of the testing was done at high settings for parity's sake, and as you can see here, going across the board, 1080p is not going to be an option. All of these games here averaged over 100 FPS at 1080p, which is certainly an option as well. If you want to toggle it down to 1080p, you can do that, and with a 17-inch display, it's still going to give you a pretty darn crisp monitor performance, as you don't really need something too much higher than 1080p on a screen this size. But 1440p also runs really well too, as you can see going across here, getting over 100 FPS in some of the games here, like Prey, Overwatch, as well as Battlefield 1. Rainbow Six Siege came down to 96 FPS, Rise of the Tomb Raider was 84, and that's a pretty darn demanding game, and Sniper Elite 4 got an average of 90 FPS, but looking at 4K, you can see the performance comes down quite a bit. It pretty much cuts it in half, going from 1440p to 4K, and the only game that I found manageable over 60 FPS was Overwatch, but since it had G-Sync, some of the other games here I still found extremely playable, like Battlefield 1 was okay at 4K, although since it's a first-person shooter title, I would probably want to drop the settings down or reduce the resolution to 1440 to ensure I was getting a smooth 60 frames per second. But something like Prey, which doesn't require, super quick actions and response time, that playing around 50 FPS was fine for me playing it at 4K because of the G-Sync and all of that. So you can definitely take advantage of that if you want to, but 1440p is probably going to be the sweet spot resolution, at least when it comes to gaming, while you can still reserve the 4K monitor for your desktop experience to get the most out of it. And for 1% lows here, we could see All of these games running pretty darn well, 1440p across the board. Rise of the Tomb Raider was the only one that came down below 60 for the 1% low, and then 4K, the only one managed to stay over 60 was Overwatch. So reiterating once again, 1440p is probably going to want to be where you're at when you're gaming on this type of laptop. Now, if you don't want to go for the 4K, you don't have to. Let's take a quick look over on the AVA Direct website with their configurator. So this is the model that I'm using here right now, and it starts off at $1,579, and that's with the GTX 1070 in there, but you can certainly go ahead and ramp it up if you want to. As you can see here, we've got the 7700 HQ with the GTX 1070 8GB, 1080p G-Sync display. If you want to get the 4K option, which I had, it's going to add $289 to the cost. But if you want the 4K and you want to take advantage of it, then you could certainly do that for the extra money, which brings our price up now to $1,868. Other options you can customize in here. By default, it's got 8GB of RAM, but I had 16GB of Kingston, which is the recommended on here. That adds $90 to the cost, so we can go ahead and select that. As you can see, we've got a webcam and fingerprint reader by default. That doesn't add any extra cost to it. Those are just part of the Clevo laptop. For the RAM in here, I did have an M.2 drive in my system, which was the Samsung 960 EVO, 250GB. So we can go ahead and select that if that's something you want to utilize. If you don't, you don't have to, but it adds an extra $119 to the cost. But it will make your boots really, really fast if that's something you want to utilize. And you can get other options as well. As like 42 different options in here for the M.2 drive or the boot drive if you want to go ahead and throw something like that in there. But as I said, mine had this one right here, the recommended spec. No other additional M.2 storage was installed. I did not have a mechanical drive, but I did have a 500GB Samsung SSD, which if you scroll down here into the more options, you can go ahead and select that. Mine was an 850, I believe, so we can go ahead and put that on there. And that's what I was using in mine, as I said. And then you can adjust other things like the wireless card. You can get an extra battery adapter if you want to. You can even do custom coloring. You should contact them if you do want to get a custom colored laptop, but it's certainly a service that they offer. If you want to get any extra software, you can do that too. They've got Windows 10 on here, but they are offering them at full price. Honestly, just speaking from experience, I would choose not to get the Windows 10 option, only because it's an extra $105, and you can honestly find licenses online for $10 or less, as I covered in a video previously on the channel. So don't spend the extra $100 on Windows 10 unless you absolutely need to for some reason. But yeah, I wouldn't go with Windows 10 on the system if you don't want it. You can also get Office installed if you want to do something like that. You know, antivirus, you can get some games on there if you want to. But I would just go ahead and leave all these options unchecked and probably go about getting your software on your own, just in case you can secure a better price on those things. But the laptop still would stand on its own and getting pretty damn good performance. You're probably not going to need a monitor or anything like that. You might want to get a mouse if you don't already own one, but they have the options here for add-ons. But if you want to shop around a bit on other websites, see if you can get a better deal, that's certainly an option. And then they also have options for customer care. So by default, it comes with a 1-year standard parts and labor limited warranty. But if you want to get an extended warranty for 2 or 3 years, then you can certainly add that on here. And it does add an extra cost. For the 2-year, it's $86. For the 3-year, it's $188. And if you want to get a system binder that kind of explains everything in the laptop, that's an extra $10. But it's a nice feature if you want to do that. And as you can see, the final configuration here that I just put together without any additional software or any other add-ons that were not hardware related, it came in at $2,214, which is really not that bad, especially when you consider the current gaming market and the desktop market, I should say, and how high-priced graphics cards are. If you were to go out and pick up a GTX 1070 today, new from retail, you're probably looking at spending anywhere between $700 and $900 because MSRP doesn't exist anymore. So you're going to pay a lot for a GTX 1070. Of course, you can upgrade it later on down the road, but this is definitely just another option to consider. And like as I was saying, with the current landscape of desktop market, I don't think it's so much necessary to say you can only get a laptop as a secondary machine for on-the-go gaming and maybe workload type stuff. I think this is actually maybe a viable option right now for someone that can't afford to build a PC or doesn't want to spend the increased amount of money for a desktop PC, when you can grab a laptop that's going to have the 1070 in there. It's got an i7, and with the configuration I did, it's even got a 4K G-Sync display, which you'd probably spend $400 to $600 on easily if you were to buy that separately in addition to a desktop PC. So in the current landscape, I don't think $2,200 is a lot to ask for a system with this type of specs. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. As always, if you do want to pick this up or any other product on the AVA Direct website, you can head over there with my link down below. And if you want to get free shipping, you go ahead and use the code JPFREESHIP at checkout, and you'll get free shipping on any of your orders from the website. But I'm going to get out of here, guys, and I hope to see you soon in the next video. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like on it and subscribe if you're not already. And until next time,